Hi, nice to be here. So we don't have much time. Let's start right away. I don't need to introduce Eva and Tilo. You're relatively new to media brands, which is our topic today. You've got an agency, a creative agency here in Berlin, but your big breakthrough and why you're here was made as a TikToker. You're a TikTok star, meanwhile, aren't you? I think star is a difficult term, but yeah, I've built a community. I do comedy TikTok, and I also have a comedy podcast that isn't only funny, but also discusses many serious issues. And yeah, your partner is somewhere here, Matthias, right? Yeah, he's supposed to be taking photos. Yeah, that's what it's like to be a media brand. You have to do content while you're on stage. Anyway, today we have a topic that has become more and more relevant in the past 10 years. Media brands and personal brands. So there was a little shitstorm on Twitter, at least for me, because people had difficulties with the concept of a brand. So how do you become a brand exactly? Well, I also have my difficulties with the term or when someone says I'm a brand. Over the last few years, I've been working on building a different brand, Deutschland 3000, which is a political podcast for young people. And using my voice, I try to convey values, and I think that also carries my face, or at least I hope so. So you started posting selfies on Instagram just recently. Why did you do that? I find it interesting that you put the second question about brands on Instagram. I just noticed that there was an interest in my person and my image, and it was easy to use that, even though it's more difficult in my Deutschland 3000 podcast, where I work with many people. I have difficulties maintaining my own account with the same commitment. So I'm more journaling about my everyday life on Instagram and not really about the content that interests people. Yeah, people have been telling me for years, Eva, just post some selfies, just do it. Yeah, I think images with your face are just more, have more effect on this platform. Tilo, 10 years ago, I met you for the first time at publica. And if I told you back then that the FAZ would buy you as a advertisement face, I would have called you crazy, I guess, because I consider myself progressive, and a conservative newspaper like the FAZ spending money on me, well, that's remarkable. A lot has happened in the past 10 years, but it says more about the FAZ and their branding problem than about us, right? FAZ is an old-fashioned newspaper from the last century and not a new and digital medium. And I think that is what they try to become with their FAZ Plus subscriptions. And this is why you get a brand. We'll talk about strategies later, also strategies of the large publishing houses. So how did you become a brand? You did some experimenting, but then you had a very clear strategy with Jung und Naiv. How did you make it your thing? Without a plan, not really with a concrete goal in mind, and also not with a clear brand. My brand is Jung und Naiv. So it's this naive approach and this unmistakable way of treating politics. I think Thilo Jung is not really a brand. I don't think people know who I am, and I try not to put myself out there online as much. So I think as a person, I'm still different than what I'm portraying at Jung and Naiv. This is a role I can play with, and this is what I experimented with in the last few years. Jung and Naiv is a journalistic brand. I never try to make myself a brand. I basically hide behind the Jung and Naiv brand. So it's like a mask for your own protection. Yeah, it is. So how private do you get? You came into the limelight for the first time with your face, even though you've done media work before. So how is that transgression? Because you were successful relatively quickly. You started during the pandemic, and now you've got more than 150,000 followers. And with your podcast, you're also addressing a lot of people. So what was the transgression like from the backstage to the front of the stage? That was actually planned for me. Matthias and I, we always want to do our own project. And this podcast, the concept, well, the fact that it became a podcast and we talk about serious topics in an entertaining way, that was because of the community, because they wanted a podcast. But in advertisement, we learned how to strategically build a brand. And many people in the audience will think, oh, stop talking about advertisements. But I think what's important if you want to start out with something, I wouldn't say into the limelight, but start out with content. You have to think about what is your role? What do you want to say? What are your contents from the beginning? And then you can pull this through over the years and build on it strategically. So it was planned for you, Eva, for you. You grew up with the web. 10, 12 years ago, we didn't have so many people from the German public broadcasting services. What was it like back then? You wrote a bachelor thesis with the title Innovation at the Public Broadcasting Services, and what prevents it? What prevented it, and what still prevents it? Well, yeah, it's really been 10 years, and it's funny that I still get asked about that. A lot has changed, especially with Funk, this island that was sheltered off by the big bosses. They knew what could happen to the format, and they really managed to build this island of innovation because we wanted a political format. It was the federal elections of 2017, and we had nothing, basically. So they said, just do it. Back then on Facebook, which sounds really crazy now, but back then it was the platform for young political formats, and they cleared our back to try out an experiment. Why did you have to put it on an island far off? Well, you had to back then. Today, with 5 years of difference, with all the know-how that we built, it could be done differently. And you have satellite formats. So I think in the state broadcasting services, there are people who want to do the same, and the format is spreading. Okay, Thilo, you used to work for the public broadcasters as well. Yeah, you could say that. There was a one-time project. When was that? 15 months after we filmed it. And only because we were contractually tied. We had a pilot episode for ZDF Neo, so it was should be something like Last Week Tonight by John Oliver, and it went quite well. And even though it was received well internally, nothing became of it because other forces within the broadcasting service were against it. It was filmed in the Berlin studio, and of course, it pissed a lot of people off because I was there. Because we were, they said we're 30 people, we can do it ourselves. And their bosses said, well, we would have asked you if you could do that. And when the decision from Mainz was due, I think many people, there were many opposing forces from Berlin in Mainz who said, Thilo Jung can't come into our house. This is a radical leftist propagandist. And well, here we are. It was prevented successfully, and 15 months later, it was published like 4 in the morning. Is it in the media platform? No, it's not. They put it on YouTube, and that's it. Richtig und wichtig is the title if you want to have a look. Yeah, that was a bitter experience because there's many people that want to try out. Eva is completely right. And then in the same system, you have people who want to prevent exactly that, who want to cling to the structures they know and that have always been like that, like the fig leaf, also a financial fig leaf. Funk was also a fig leaf for a long time. To pretend like we're doing something with young people. And that was all. And there was really not a lot happening because there's some big bosses there who don't want young people taking up their posts. So this is inherent to the system and it's logical, but it's bad. Okay, I want to talk about that with Eva as well. So you haven't seen Olaf Scholz just once. You're basically buddies. You've met twice within the last few months. Why wasn't this broadcasted in ARD? I don't know. I would have liked to see it in the first TV channel, but I don't know if the core audience of my podcast is fit for linear TV. Yeah, they need to go. Yeah, I think the interview I led reached a lot of people, but on other channels. What is it like? So you're coming to the big table that Thilo Jung created with the Federal Press Conference. Isn't there a lot of jealousy from colleagues? Well, none of that is reported directly to me, and I don't think people envy my work with Scholz, to be honest. I think they do. So what is it like if you read news about each other? Don't you get a lot of negative criticism, for example, on your post on TikTok about sugar daddies and stuff like that? Aren't you sometimes attacked pretty frankly and without an editorial office behind you? What is it like? Well, on TikTok and with the podcast, we have a very tight-knit community. So the question is always, how do you build a community? What people do you approach? It's not only about yourself. It's about the people who watch your content and who want to identify with it. And the way I talk to people is what is reflected to me. And with all those comedy formats, that's very good. But whenever you say something contested, like I did something on Twitter about right-wing profiles and how they follow each other and unfollow each other and how the system works, I got a mini shitstorm for like a few hours. That I was called the granddaughter of. So that was difficult. And you ask yourself, how far will it go? Will they ring my doorbell? And in my last video about sugar daddies and sugar mummies, a few men and women approached me with the same old stuff. But I don't get real hate. And I'm thankful for that. I think for you, Thilo and Eva, it might be different because you have a lot of political content. Yeah, politics polarizes. If you make one political statement, more than 20% of people will hate you. I was recently at Sandra Maischberger, and we received 20 emails about how crazy I am and I should be burned at the stake and so on. I've just gotten used to it. I've developed a thick skin and I can laugh about it now, but not everyone can do that. And I can't say Iris just develop a thick skin. Everyone's different, and my way was just getting used to it. In politics, it's normal, unfortunately, but yes. But, well, you asked about envy. We somehow got into the hate debate, but we started with envy. You said Instagram, and if we're talking about brands, followers, this is a strict concept of your range. I look at the range of my colleagues and I realize, oh my God, they've got twice or thrice as many followers. It's not like I feel envy. It's like, oh my God, and I start doubting myself. Should I post more selfies? But this kind of range has become a currency. And I was recently talking to a young reporter who's really talented, who told me, Eva, I don't have followers on Instagram. And colleagues of mine aren't able to make the jump into editorial offices because broadcasters are telling them you don't have a range. Well, that's shitty, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Because I've got something that other colleagues of mine need to achieve, and that also puts me in a spot where I need to put pressure on my colleagues about a currency that public broadcasters gladly accept instead of building something on their own. And it's an external currency that's not even from our platform. And it's such a situation of pressure, and it's so complex. And those gatekeepers, the people we wouldn't even need because they have their own range. People who criticize us all the time, they are under that pressure. And they sit in houses who apparently don't invest into their own people, but Thilo and I, we could just go up and leave. So you're buying people with a good range that won't work, and it's a bad thing because there's bad feelings on so many ends and also envy.
Okay, so the journalist in me just smelled blood. So people who can leave again, tell me more. Yeah, okay. So, for example, I mean, that's what Funk has done several times. They buy talent or YouTubers from different platforms and they come, but they leave again. And they say, well, yeah, I mean, that was interesting for this part of my journey, but now I want to do different types of content that aren't okay for this platform. Or maybe I want to do advertisements, which you can't do in public broadcasting. And so they build up people in parallel. I would count myself among those people. And then it's probably like that all the time, right? I could also leave, and I can ask myself, is this a symbiotic relationship with the system? But it really made my stomach hurt to hear what's happening to these colleagues of mine. And I really think that people in positions of power in these media corporations really need to ask themselves, is that what they want to focus on, this number? Right, which means that in addition to your paid official working time, you need to invest so much time and energy into building up that reach online. And I don't really think you can't expect that from anyone. Yeah, so this advertisement thing, Iris, how do you feel about that? You can kind of look at this whole media circus from the sidelines a bit. There are these two people who've kind of made it. Obviously, Eva with someone who also got some support and a lot of sweat and hard work. Thilo is someone who came in kind of from the sidelines and then put in a lot of sweat and hard work. And now you have these large publishing houses and these large TV stations. We have our quotas, we have our quota young people. Yeah, I agree with Eva. We have this, that's the same in the entire media sector. For example, for us, we have this incredibly small agency. We started, built ourselves up, and then COVID happened. I don't know if any marketing managers are sitting here, but it's a lot of assholes that really give you a lot of pressure. They say, we control you, you are exchangeable, and that's also what's so important for the brand. The question is this person in front of the camera, is this person exchangeable? All these brands work that way, that they only get people who have reach, because then it's easier for them to roll out their campaign, because then they just grab someone who already has reach. That's how these TV stations work. That's how the streaming services work. And this entire sector is moving in the direction of only being about personal branding at this point. Who already has a good reach, who can we use? I try to introduce some relaxation, especially with regards to for these people who feel so much pressure. I empathize with you, Eva, when people are asking, why does this person have more reach than me? What do I do differently? How do I build up the same type of following? You should never ask yourself about the reach, but should ask yourself about the content. What's my message? What's my point? What am I trying to achieve? One thing a lot of people also underestimate is, who am I even talking to? Who is my community? What kind of exchange is there? So Thilo once shared our podcast, and it was incredible what kind of rise we had in listeners, because, well, if Thilo likes us, then other people suddenly also like us and stay. And I really think this trend is very difficult because it comes with a lot of pressure. But I think we need to have a conversation about it, and you can't just say, oh, it's all shitty, I'm just going to remove myself from that, because that's going to be very difficult, especially, at least right now. I mean, yeah, reach, that's bullshit, right? It's bullshit to compare that, because you can't compare apples and oranges. For example, our Young and Naive channel has 500,000 YouTube followers. How do you compare that to Rezo, who has 4 million followers? Of course, it's 8 times as many, but he also produces completely different type of content. We do political journalism that's usually uncomfortable, frustrating. You have to deal with that. You have to get into that. It's just a 3-minute video. Most of the time, I don't feel like doing that. And the other thing is much more, it's entertainment, right? We learned that on TV as well. Of course, we don't compare the viewership of the news with the football game. We've learned all of these things, but for some reason, it's still like that today. And I mean, I did modeling in the past, and it did used to be that way, that when models were booked, that you wrote on your set card how many followers you had on Instagram, but that's how it is today. And also, I mean, Alice was here before us. In this capitalist system, it makes total sense. because they do that to reduce their marketing budget, because they need to invest less in marketing. Because, for example, Eva comes in and brings in free advertisement and her community. And there are these compilations of incredibly sad musicians who need a viral TikTok before they can really publish this new album. So there's these people who I really celebrated as a teenager. A few times we kind of stumbled when we talked about branding and reach and kind of use those interchangeably. But I really think branding also means that your values and your mission are very clear. And so when you can write those down, it is often much more value to have a relatively small target audience, but that is an incredibly good fit for what you're doing and goes along with everything you do. It's better than having like millions of people who say, oh, I just want to watch one of those videos once in a while, or like a funny reel. Yeah, and I mean, I could tell you as an ad person, it's so easy to reach an audience of millions immediately. Imagine you want to become a moderator. If your concept was that you would always shout at your guests, you would immediately have millions of followers. Oh, I should have done that when I interviewed the German Chancellor. Everyone would watch it. Everyone would watch that, like Olaf Scholz just being shouted at constantly. But then you need to play that role for a long time. Then you need to be that moderator who permanently shouts at people, and you don't want to be that person, or who uses informal you in German constantly. That was a very German joke. But yeah, also having that reach is also kind of dangerous. For example, I don't want to be Finn Kliman right now, a German YouTuber who built up a brand based on apparently lies, exploitation of his own community, fraud, deception, right? Like we can also see what that can cause. There's a degree of self-importance, megalomania, and in the end, well, you can also see when you look at those analytics, just because I only have a tenth of his followership, maybe it's possible that my followers are much more valuable, quote unquote, because maybe they like what we do and very engaged. And for a lot of these large people, maybe 90% of those followers maybe don't even see these things. They have followers, but those are worthless. Iris, when we spoke on the phone the other day, you also had this term, the Kloman Effect, on the telephone. Yeah, not. Yeah, so we're back to envy now, right? On the one hand, as a personal brand, you need to be holier than the Pope. It has to be honest. It doesn't have to be holy. Okay, but we're talking about Kloman, where basically you had good content. You have to present that constantly and create it. Once you stop, you are gone. You should not sell yourself and not do advertisements. And once you start selling things, or when you make money, you need to donate that money for a good cause. Is Kloman also a product, a logical product of the system? I mean, Finn also had an ad agency. I think he understood very well how do you build yourself up as a brand. And I can imagine that in that case, over time, you might think, I need to present myself that way all the time. I need to be perfect. I need to be the guy who buys these masks elsewhere and does everything better and differently. And then you can't stick to that, right? Like you can't actually be that. And that's what happened, like just happens. And then, so I mean, you need to really strategically think in advance, how can I remain honest? Eva is completely right. You need to be honest. People will catch on to it. They're not stupid. And when you're honest and build that up, then you won't have the algorithms. You won't just go all the way to the top right away. It's difficult, right? You need to control certain algorithms in a way so they push you to the top all the time. And for example, if you're just have this rise that is just very thoughtful, that's very prudent, very sober, but in this cacophony of information on the internet, do people even have time to just do that? And to like, do people even have the ability to get through that, right? Like, because Thilo started at a time when YouTube right? Like that, he had 10 years. Eva, you already started writing and earning prizes at 19. Does a young person nowadays even still have the chance, right, in this system of algorithms, in this attention economy? Does this young person even still has the chance to build up a name for themselves? Is that even possible still in this, given the loudness and the noise? What do you mean, like a name? I mean, right, build up a name and a brand so that you can live off of that. We will talk about money later as well. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that sounds slightly idealist. Also what you just said, but I would totally sign onto that. If you as a person have a topic that really drives you, or a job, or you've kind of found like this twist, and you just kind of play into that constantly, and you are transparent about that, then it's easy to find people who are interested in that and will continue following that. And I think people think it's sketchy when people make money off of that. I completely disagree with that. And there's so many YouTubers and influencers. Everyone knows how the business model works and completely celebrates when those people go to those luxury hotels in Dubai or something. I would say it's the opposite. I mean, I was born in 1990. I was in that transitional period, right? Thomas Gottschalk, every day after Wetten, Das, would always have looked at his fax machine after the show to see what his viewer numbers were. But that wasn't transparent. No one would have shared that. But now every follower of Diana zu Löwen or Rezo, everyone knows that they need views and likes, and they think I support them by watching this video. So it's the first generation that makes it transparent what they rely on. But Rezo is a great example, right? In the days after the CDU video, he was taken apart in the classical media. Right, yeah, the classical old media, not by his target audience, because they know exactly how this works, because they're motivated by it. Many young people want a career exactly like that. They want to become a brand and can just get all these incredible ad deals. I mean, all three of us are very much motivated by content and certain types of themes. But some people just say, oh, I just want a life like Caro Dauer. I mean, yeah. The old media took him apart because they were envious, but we're back to envious, right? Because he did their job. But I think that's interesting because the FAZ was loudest with regards to Rezo, and they talked about evil ads, and now they've bought you, so you help them sell their own paper, right? Yeah. And I was able to go on holiday with that money. I was very happy and very thankful. So I didn't have to use the money from my community for that. Oh, yeah, I mean, that's the other problem. How do you live? What do you live off of? We live mostly off of, I'm not allowed to donate from the money that our audience, the donations that our audience sends to us. And how much of that is YouTube ads, percentage-wise, single-digit percent in terms of percent. So we really have the most minimal ad settings on YouTube because we are scared that if we demonetized entirely, that then YouTube, because that would mean that YouTube wouldn't make money off of us either. So, for example, like with the Deutschland 3000 video, they wouldn't recommend us to anyone. Right, for example, if someone watches Deutschland 3000 and then recommending our content as well. So you basically just have ads so you don't get shadow banned. Yeah. Oh, wow, okay. So just the money you make off of Google, you can't live off of that. No, we can't and we don't want to. Because then we would be ad financed, right? You know, journalism, political journalism on YouTube is often not very friendly or good for ads, right? When it's about war, hostage-taking, terrorism, those aren't kinds of topics that are good for ads. So if we relied entirely on ads, that would shape our work. We would say, well, let's not do something about terrorism because we don't make money off of that. We would rather do something about Finn Kliman. Oh, I mean, I would not necessarily agree with that wholesale because another very successful crowd-sourced finance project is Lage der Nation, a podcast. And I think they have a very different approach to dealing with ad partners. I mean, yeah, we also thought about that, but we don't go down the profit maximization route where we really use all possible sources of income, tickets, theaters, kind of premium Patreon pages and donations. No, we say we want one source of income and that works for us. And it's worked for us for 10 years and we don't want to do more because it would mean more work. It would also limit us in our what we consider what's our real work. And so it's not our goal to become rich. We're happy that there's stuff that's our stuff. We really love it. We enjoy it. I mean, we turned our hobby into our job, right? And that we can live off of that. I don't have to become rich. That's nice. I can kind of feel a sense of idealism from all of you. It's probably, you can't do this without that. How is this going to continue? It's 2022. TikTok is kind of becoming more mainstream. It's kind of on the rise. We talked about Instagram. Instagram is also trying to become more like TikTok. So with formats, especially long formats like yours, sometimes hours, is that something that you can succeed with in the future? I mean, right, like you also mentioned this term slackability when we last spoke. Or do you have to become smaller and shorter and faster because people don't have that attention span anymore? I think you can still have long formats, but you just need to make sure that you have, snackable content that you can, within a minute, you maybe can't explain something very complex, but can at least make people interested in learning more about that. I also think that's like an incredible challenge in journalism because it's really difficult to represent complex topics well. Matthias and I, with our channels, we really struggle once we want to make people pay attention to a serious topic, and we look at every single word, and we look very precisely, how exactly do we write this? It is hard work, but I think it's really worth it because I see a possibility there, an opportunity to push those longer formats and to create more of those longer formats. All the criticism with regard to TikTok is around, but I think it's useful to look at that with a constructive view, what it can do for you. Do you have any suggestions when it comes to kind of like harder topics? Or, I mean, we've been practicing that at Deutschland 3000 for years, how to present harder topics at Instagram. You can look at that. But I mean, podcasts are the best example for how people become a brand and build an incredibly loyal community. We recently looked at just how many people use Apple to access us. So there are people who've essentially just spent 70 years worth of time with our brand on Apple or not even to mention Spotify, right? So they spent an incredible amount of time with us. So for example, Tommy and Felix had no gatekeepers. They just created this podcast and just consistently worked on it. And now the ZDF comes and is like, oh, Tommy Schmidt, he has incredible reach, we can incredible viewership. But obviously that makes it easier for the ZDF public broadcasting in Germany, also easier instead of building up a late night show over years. But no, of course, you can go for length. Of course, there's all this criticism of these brands because it also creates pressure, but there's an enormous chance for young people who have one topic, who have one passion, for example, especially when it comes to marginalized groups who've often been excluded from older publishing houses because they weren't interesting enough. Now, with a comparatively small target audience that would be negligible for TV, you can build something up. You can build something that you can live off of, like Thilo just described, that will take time. So that's why I think this beginning, the early times where you're starting to build it is the hardest because you need to finance those early days. Maybe you're doing it on the side while you're also working full time, or you need to get some financing. But the chance is much larger than it's ever been before. I mean, yeah, you could have told me that 10 years ago, what you just said. Oh, the people just want short stuff, right? Like, that's bullshit. There are people who want short formats, and there are people who want to listen to Eva for 3 hours while they're in the car, or La Generation, or watch YouTube, right? There's these people and those people. And at some point, we just stopped worrying about, oh, how long does this video have to be? How long can this interview be? And we just have one criteria, and that's what's important to us. What do we want to see? And what type of interview do we want to create? And that's our starting point, because we assume that because we are interested in this, then that also kind of touches the audience, right? So if it interests us, that will interest them. And that's the basis for journalism. If the audience knows, oh, Thilo's interested in this, then there's got to be a reason for that. So, I'm also going to be interested in that. And so it's just, we have to make them interested in the interview. I think that's fascinating because when we spoke yesterday and talked about if Jung and Naiv would work on TV as well, and you said, of course. I mean, of course there's space to broadcast it, but it's not necessary at all for us to be on TV. I would rather prefer if our colleagues at public broadcasting use this as an example, right? There are these summer interviews. They're exactly 18 minutes long. So you pre-record it. It doesn't have to be 18 minutes. You can also talk to them for 2 hours. With Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, right? You can put it onto your media platform, make it transparent, and just send a best of, like an 18-minute best of in the evening. Why aren't you doing that? There's no good reason other than journalistic laziness.
Eva, sind sehr viele Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Eva, there are a lot of colleagues here from the broadcasting stations and the publishing houses. Is there any advice you would give to them how you can build a brand and maybe create the symbiosis? So I think there's an enormous opportunity here. Media houses need to think about recruitment more. There's much more competition for this talent, both regards to their know-how in terms of the content, but also their distributional knowledge, right? Because they know these platforms better than most of their bosses. So it would be interesting to be able to have something to offer to these people, right? We will help you build up your brand. We want to work with you if you tell us where you want to be. And we're trying to figure out how to get you to that point. So that entire pressure is not on the shoulders of a single person who has to do this in their free time. So it would be the amazing symbiosis if your boss said, so you want to become that type of brand, and they work with you, right? BuzzFeed did that. They had beat reporters, so they had a beat, and so they picked that, and they say, for example, I'm interested in LGBTQIA, I want to be the expert for that, and it was a win-win situation. Because at some point, those people stood for the brand BuzzFeed, but also stood for that topic, and were established in the communities. But BuzzFeed profited from that content and from that reporting, and I think a lot more publishing houses and broadcasting stations can use that as an example instead of always saying, nobody can become big, and then there's envy, and so we make sure that everyone stays small. No, recognizing passions and topics and helping them, enabling, that's something what I would want to see much more.
Yeah, you know the pressure in media houses. You work with both sides. So you've got customers and also influencers who are looking for content partners. So how do you gauge this? What could the publishing or media houses do better, and what could influencers do better and maybe not rely on that much? I think a lot of that was already put very well by Eva. I think it's important, media houses should look for influencers who really fit their topics. You could also build them yourselves. But I think there's a reason that media houses don't build their own influencers. They're not scalable. As soon as you have a personal brand, growth is impossible because people want to work with that person. And how difficult would it be for a media house to have a lot of names who could, as Eva said, basically go anywhere, be their own brand? So they try to keep people small. Is that a reaction of fear? Yeah, I do think so. It's a philosophical question. It's a question of property and control. How do you deal with your employees? Do you want them to know they're good, or do you want to keep them small? And when I see people, how great they are, how much potential they have, and who just say, screw reach, I just want to do a good job, I would wish for the industry to reflect and acknowledge that. And I think the way is leading towards more quality, also for influencers. In the past 10 years, we've only looked at reach, who's loud, and now we're sick of it. And now we take a close look at people, who's good, who's honest, who's transparent, who delivers content. And this makes me hopeful for the future. Thilo, a last question for you. There's a lot of fans of you here, also in the stream. What advice would you give to someone like you 10 years ago who says, I have an idea which I've always wanted to do, I'll try it on my own? Well, this is where I would start with your passion. Follow your passion and dreams. Don't plan to earn money. That's a nice side effect. Try to realize your potential and your dreams. And if others like it, it'll become big by itself. So do what you think is missing. Do produce the content you would like to see. The rest will do itself. All right, friends, we're at the end of our time slot. So people can like you, love you, find you terrible, but they can't ignore you. So keep on doing your thing. Thank you so much.